empathy is a discipline, it's context, it's courage. So it's really important that we don't lose it, because if we do, we won't just lose our connection, we're going to lose each other.
What if the key to transformation lies in shifting your perspective? Hi, I'm Dr. Payal Beri. Welcome to Reframing Perspectives. Every conversation here is about one thing: how empathy changes the way we lead, connect, and create impact. Each episode, we get to explore deep, authentic conversations designed to expand your mindset. Whether you're looking to transform your leadership, deepen your relationships within your circle, your community, and friends, or gain clarity in your own personal growth, each episode will inspire you to see things differently and take action. If you're ready to challenge your thinking and embrace transformation, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Have you ever had a moment where someone says something and you feel your whole body just pause? Like it's almost like you get stopped in your tracks. I remember this one particular moment where in the middle of 2020, and a friend of mine, someone who I know, we've known for years, made a joke about the looting and the photos that were coming out around the looting right after George Floyd happened. And that was the first comment that was made. It was a joke. And it wasn't just her. There was others that started, laughing at those jokes. And I remember thinking that moment, like, wait, what? Like, that's the first thing that you're going to say? That's the first reaction to have about what just happened here? And I said it really calmly, but I literally said, that's what we're really going to lead with in this moment. And of course, the discomfort kicked in. There was a lot of silence. And a couple of days later, this friend called me up to air things out and just to kind of talk about what happened. And I remember in that moment when we talked about like how leading with a joke wasn't appropriate. And what they said was, quote unquote, that, obviously what happened was horrific and it was like really bad and disgusting. But, advocating for that or talking about that isn't really my thing. Like I care a lot about animals and, that's what really affects me. And here's the thing, we can care about whatever matters to us, but that's not what this was about. And that in that moment, I realized, oh my God, I understand what's happening here. It was about how quickly we disengage from something when it doesn't personally affect us. And then we justify it as like, oh my God, we're losing empathy as a society. And right now that is so dangerous. And that conversation stuck with me and it really has stayed with me. Not because it was surprising or shocking, but because it wasn't. Because that was a normal thing that was happening. And it was just wild. And of course, studying empathy, this is something that I'm just thinking about, like, wait, what does this really mean? Because we do this all the time. And I started thinking about how, like, when someone says, well, I don't really get involved in politics. And what they really mean is, I don't want to feel uncomfortable, right? Or like when someone says, well, that issue doesn't really affect me at all. And what they're really saying is, I've decided that empathy is optional. And that's just like this thing right here. It's not a priority for me. And here's the other part, right, that I think is really important for us to think about and consider. We're not going to be able to care about every single issue out there in this world. That's not physically, emotionally possible. But when things are happening in our society that are clearly dangerous, when our humanity is being lost, and we are having a form of apathy, that's when I think that things are really problematic. That's when I think about like what's going on here, because this is not okay. And that's where that conversation, it stuck with me, because this was a reaction that was happening because it was someone who also felt that it's like, yeah, it sucks and it's hard, but what else am I supposed to do about it? And that made me realize that I really think, honestly, this is exactly why we are where we are right now in our society, emotionally, culturally. We're living in a time where individualism has been sold to us as freedom. But in reality, what it's done is that by being so individualistic, it's actually made us more disconnected than ever. We've lost the muscle memory of community, of looking out for each other, because now it's deemed dangerous. Now it's like, well, I don't want to get involved because what could happen? And we see ourselves not as a larger collective, but we start to see ourselves as these isolated personal opinions and curated identities. So there's a rift, there's a break that's happened. And so the default becomes, if it's not affecting me directly or someone who I know directly, then I don't have to engage with it emotionally. because it's easier for us to avoid discomfort than it is to examine the things that we allow to happen, that we enable. And it's easier for us to scroll past than to sit with the weight of, wait, what does this mean for me? What does this mean for how I'm behaving, for how I'm contributing to this? Because the thing is that when people say that, is it bad that I don't care? And it's like, well, every action and inaction is still an action, right? Like it's still creating some kind of energy there, because when we have apathy and when we lose empathy, then we're kind of letting people know that it's okay to get away with whatever it is that's happening. It's okay. Like, we're just going to put up with it. We're going to be okay with the way that things are happening right now. And it's not affecting me directly. So, oh, well. And so when we have this and we've like disintegrated that part, right? We think about those, like, for example, living in a society as well, where if someone falls down on the road, we're like, well, I don't want to get involved because then what happens? Like we live in a society where being litigated is so like big that we fear that us getting involved is going to cause bigger problems than to actually help somebody out. And that's just wild. Like all of these moments are the things that have actually helped to disintegrate empathy. It really has. And that's why we are in the society that we are in right now. That's why we live the way that we live. This is where, going back to that, I realized like, wow, there was a lot of avoidance that was happening, right? And when we have that, the avoidance lives there because it's these little moments that we've convinced ourselves we're being neutral when we're actually just checking out. And when we check out, what we've done is we've looked the other way and we've kind of created a disempowerment within each other. And what I've realized through the work that I've done is that avoidance isn't neutral. It's a self-protection measure that wraps in detachment. And all of us have been trained to confuse the two. But when we are living in a hyper-individualized society like the one that we do here in the United States, we're taught that discomfort is a problem to fix and it's not a teacher to learn from. So it's really looking at it as when we have discomfort, it's okay to put up boundaries. When we're not comfortable, it's okay for us to just kind of step away from it. That being neutral is essentially just saying like, hey, you know what? This isn't our issue. So we're actually being the mature ones here by not stepping in and by not talking about this. That's what we've actually kind of mixed around this in a hyper individualized society, that we don't sit with that discomfort and we don't learn from it. But instead, we create these like self-soothing terms, which have its place for sure. But we have these self-soothing phrases that we use whenever some kind of discomfort happens in our society. We'll be like, you know what, this is just too much right now. I just can't deal with it. Or, I don't want to get involved. I don't know what's going to happen here. And we say things like, well, I just don't have enough context. Well, what I say is then ask for context. Ask for like, hey, I don't have enough context over here. Where do I learn more? Right? And I'll go more in depth about avoidance in a later solo podcast episode, because there is so much I could talk about with the whole avoidance and the things that there. But I do want to keep us on track around why losing empathy right now is so dangerous in our society. And I do also want to acknowledge that some of it is valid about what's happening and why we're losing so much empathy in our society, because we have our emotional bandwidth in our limits. It's not that we're not talking enough about it. It's the fact that there's too much also happening at the same time. But when we have avoidance, we avoid enough of the hard things, we eventually stop noticing anyone else's pain. We become so numb to it. So I'll just say that piece because I think it's really important to discuss, but I'll go into avoidance separately. Right now, I do want to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, because of the overwhelm that we're experiencing, there is an emotional disconnection that's happening. And the disconnection is what creates apathy. And apathy is what breaks down societies down from the inside when we stop caring. The minute we stop caring and the minute we just don't have the energy to care, which by the way, is being done on purpose, but we'll go into that in a minute. But we weren't built to function alone. We've been taught to feel alone. And even when we're surrounded by people, it's what we do. We're scrolling on our phones. We've created a society of convenience. We don't have to interact with whoever we don't want to. And so I think about that. And we're living in a time where it's easier to curate a comfort life than engage with things that are complex and uncomfortable for us. And unless we choose to pause and feel and question and reconnect, we become a society that just doesn't just lose empathy. We forget about how to even recognize it. We forget about how to be empathetic. And that conversation that I had with that friend really stuck because of that. And I felt like that was a really critical moment in our life where, because we are so overstimulated and we've become so overwhelmed and exhausted from the bad news and the 24-hour cycle that literally gets paid by how much they can scare you and create fear, which, by the way, it's their job to do that, and check, well done, because they've literally done that. If we think about the last 5 years and what's happened, there's been so much fear that's been built in, and that we become too afraid to care about something because we're afraid of the backlash that might come with it. We start to not want to talk about things. We start to just like turn our heads away. And so when we think about why we're losing empathy and why that's becoming so dangerous, it's because we're like connected to our phones and TikTok and Instagram. We're just getting fed with bad news, bad news, bad news. And so we're just like, how much more can I take? So I get it. I really get it. Like, I know I've had moments where I've been so burnt out. To be really honest, last year in 2024, for about 2 months, I was so burnt out. This podcast was actually supposed to come out last year, but I was so burnt out, I couldn't do it. And part of the reason I was so burnt out was because of everything that was happening. It was election season, the things that were happening. Like, there was all these like slander campaigns, just all the negativity. You couldn't turn your phone on without seeing something that was negative. And honestly, you know what I did? I literally sat there and I watched the Flintstones. I couldn't even watch the Jetsons cartoon because there were things about it. It was the same week that Elon Musk came out with his robots, and I turned on the Jetsons and I was like, oh my God, they're made and she's a robot, right? So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to the Flintstones. I literally had to do that because I was so overwhelmed with everything happening in this world. So I totally understand that there are times and there's things that happen that we have to shut down, and that it's just overwhelming. And honestly, we are not necessarily built to be exposed to so much. It's not humanly possible for us to care about every single issue that exists in this world. However, when something is happening and we still turn our other eye to it and we are exposed to it, that's what's problematic, because we've become so numb to all of this. We've become so overstimulated that it's just like, I don't know. Oh, sure, something else is happening. Okay, I just want to just relax today. I don't want to think about that, right? And that's okay. I'm not saying that losing empathy in our society or the way that we're existing means that we have to be activated at every moment of every day of our lives. That's actually not really great for our mental health either. But it means that when things do happen, when things happen to our community, our society, our neighbors, that we don't look at that the first reaction that we have isn't like, ooh, I don't want to get involved with that because what are they going to say? What's going to happen? Ooh, I don't want to knock on their door because what if they have a gun? Like, all of these things, right? And to be honest, like, I get it. Like, I'm a South Asian brown person living in this country, right? There was honestly a moment where I was even thinking like, I don't know. I'm a little too nervous to say the things that I want to say because what does that mean for me? Like, I was questioning it. So I understand that another reason why we're losing empathy in our society is because there has been really a deep amount of fear that's been instilled in us. And it's, again, coming from these micro moments that we are in. And I realized how much it was affecting me. And so, I started sitting with this and this idea lately after thinking about all of these things about why we're losing it, why is this happening, why I'm seeing it within myself also. Like, I'm like, I can't anymore right now. But I started wondering, what if empathy is being stripped from us on purpose? Because when we stop empathizing with each other, we become easier to divide. Think about that, right? Because when we're divided, we're easier to control. And when we're afraid, we're easier to manipulate. You see where I'm going with all of this? It happens on a regular basis. Think about your family, think about your cousins, think about those. Like, I have that in my family, right? Let's just think about this. If I can convince you that someone else's pain is a threat to your comfort, that their gain is your loss, right? That just their pure existence means that you're going to have to lose something of your own. What are you going to do? You're going to build up walls, right? You're going to retreat. You're going to stop asking questions because you're like, whoa, what's happening here? And you'll start defending systems that were never built to serve either of us because now we're being pitted against each other and we're too stuck in that place. That's how those who benefit from our division win. The ones who thrive on chaos, the ones who fund outrage cycles, the ones who profit from clicks, not context, and who'd rather have you and I argue with our neighbor than notice the policies that are quietly eroding our future. Think about that, right? This happens so much. There's another podcast, another episode that I'm going to have that's specifically around like how we're not listening to each other anymore, but we're just like talking to each other. I see this happening, and this is literally what is so scary to me because the fact of the matter is that there are people right now that are calling empathy a weakness. There are people right now that are calling that empathy is a sin. And I never thought in my lifetime that I would ever hear that things like compassion, kindness, empathy are going to be considered a sin. Like that is just wild to me that something like this is going to be considered a sin, to be kind to someone else, to have empathy. I think the thing is that people are actually having a misconception of what empathy really means. Empathy means context. Empathy means understanding what is behind what happened. We understand the why. We understand why did someone make the decisions that they did. It doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean that we have to, accept it. And I think that people think that if you have empathy, that you're going to justify someone's actions. No, 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 my friend. That is not empathy. Empathy is understanding the context of why something happened. That is where we have empathy. Like, oh, I understand why they may have voted this way. I understand why they are doing what they're doing. I understand their narrative because I have taken the time to understand the context and understand the situation. That's empathy. It's empathy is understanding the emotional things that may like, why is it that, we have two sides that are equally angry, that are equally upset, that are equally emotionally in pain and exhausted, but they're not seeing that. They're not seeing the fact that like we're both in pain, we're both hurting. They're just like been pitted against each other because then the ones who need to get what they want out of all of us get it. So the erosion of empathy isn't the fact that it's a sin and it's negative, but it's being painted that way. But what's really it is the fact that we're not holding people accountable. We've taken that avoidance, we've taken that neutrality, we've taken that whole like, I don't get involved because of the fear that's been instilled in us that if we get involved, then we're going to have some repercussions, we're going to have some backlash. And that has caused us to be like, it's better for me to just stay out of it, which just enables people to do the bad behaviors that they get away with. And then that builds a sense of entitlement. And then that ultimately erodes the way that we think about community.
Hi, so I'm pausing the episode for a quick moment and for a quick favor. If you haven't already, if you could just click subscribe, leave a review wherever you're listening to this episode, it would be really helpful. The only way we can know to make sure that we provide the right type of podcast episodes, the right type of guests, and to make sure that we're delivering the type of content that you actually want to hear, it's through your reviews and through your support. Thanks. And now back to the episode.
So all of this literally came from that moment when I was having that conversation and I was like, wow. And I can't help it, right? My work is in empathy. Like I teach about empathy and leadership. I talk about this stuff with my clients in organizations, with, my entrepreneur clients, all of them. But whenever it comes up, it always leaves me fascinated by it. Because when we stop empathizing with each other, we become easier to divide. And that is just full stop what it is. You see, the thing is that because we look at each other's existence as an enemy, and that's what we've been painted as, we're not having conversations. We're not actually learning from each other and learning about what actually, maybe there's issues that we care about, but like the fear and the ego of like, I've got to win takes over and we don't actually come together. And what happens here is that like, if we think about this, that if we're too angry or empathetic, we're too distracted to organize with each other. And if we're too busy feeling threatened by someone who looks, lives, or believes differently than you, then you're not going to join forces with them to demand change. Why would we, right? Because we've been pitted against each other. And you're going to stay in your lane. It's like, don't rock the boat, right? You're just going to do your own thing and you're going to vote out of fear and not out of the vision of what really needs to happen. And we're going to tell ourselves that, well, at least it's not happening to me. And that I find really interesting. When someone says that, I get so excited about it because here's the thing. Everyone else is also convinced to look another way, right? That's the disintegration of empathy. That is a win for the people who need to win. The more we are disempowered, the more that we're distrustful of other communities, the more disconnected we are. That disconnection, that people don't build coalitions, right? And we build echo chambers. And so that's what's been happening. We all have our echo chambers, right? Nothing threatens the status quo more than people from different lived experiences. And I even remember going back to that conversation that I talked to you about. I remember that moment. The takeaway for this friend of mine wasn't necessarily that, oh, you're right. That was probably wrong of me to say or to start with, or I realized that I was avoiding this or I was feeling uncomfortable about this. It wasn't any of that. What was really interesting was that the takeaway was more about, well, I guess then that just means that this is something I'll have to joke around when you're not around. So it wasn't even sitting with maybe there's something here that I should have reframed. It wasn't something where it's like, let me hear this out. Let me listen to this and realize that, oh, wait a second, maybe that reaction was also out of my own comfort and my privilege of what I have. And so, oh, well, so instead of recognizing that maybe I did something here that was painful or hurtful, even though it doesn't affect me, it wasn't necessarily the way to go about things, right? That is what I found really interesting is that like there was this, oh, well, reaction to it. So I look at that and I'm just like, oh, so this isn't even an opportunity of trying to re-engage with empathy. And what I think that we don't talk enough about is the fact that it's not just the fact that they're hijacking our empathy, but the reason that they're able to hijack our empathy is because they're also the ones who are winning from all of this. They're also hijacking our biology. Like, this is really strategic and smart, guys, because fear isn't just an idea. It's a primal response in all of us that we're hardwired around, right? So, like, in the early stage, like, again, I don't care how fancy and modern our technology comes, like, biologically, we are still back in the day, in the caveman days, where we have to scan for threats and we react quickly when something unfamiliar enters our environment. And we become biologically primed to fear the unknown. So we pull away from what we don't understand and we overreact when we feel under attack. So guess what's happening? We're constantly under attack. It's like one thing, the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing. Well, our nervous systems are a wreck completely and they haven't caught up. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to navigate a hyper-connected world technologically, constantly overstimulated, emotionally complex world with primal wiring that's still built for threats and for attacks. And we haven't actually learned how to manage that. And that was the thing, was that like when we respond to the part of our brain where it's helped to process emotions and access empathy, we're not even accessing that as a community because we're reacting so much from our amygdala, which is our fear center. And the louder the fear, the quieter the compassion, because we're just like, hey, I'm just going to survive here, right? That's what's happening to all of us. That's what I feel as a brown person living here. So this manipulation of our biology, it's surgical. They know that we're wired to react and not be responsive and reflect. So they feed outrage and we fall for it. We push the narratives that make us feel personally under attack, and not by systems, but by each other. And when someone actually like campaigns for the systems, then we again fight against each other. And that's the trick. If I believe that you are a threat, right? Then I'll never stop to notice who's actually pulling the strings because I'm just going to keep my eye on you. Like, I don't trust you. And here's what's really dangerous. Empathy cannot exist without safety. It just can't. So we don't access compassion when our nervous system is in a crisis. And guess what it is? The world is in a crisis and we have way too much exposure to it. So we access defense, we access our survival mode. And survival mode isn't built for bridge building. It's built for protection, for urgency, and for reaction. And we're not even built to be reacting the way that we are. That's why we're just like all literally, it's like just falling apart. We're snapping at each other, right? We're dragging each other down, assuming the worst, not because we're like these cold hearted humans, but because we're chronically dysregulated and we're deeply disconnected. This is like all the time. I know I feel this way. It's like, I'm just like, gosh, is there any time that I can just see good news? Why is it that when a politician talks about things that actually should matter to everyone, right? Like affordability, healthcare, education, wanting these things for the society, for the greater good, the people who wouldn't even be negatively affected by those policies get scared because it's a form of like, wait a second, that means it's taking away from me. And you can feel the panic ripple across the media outlets. Suddenly you see a slander campaigns going off about these politicians. And the thing is, here's the other thing, right? They start pulling words like socialist, radical, threat to freedom. And because as a society, we've become so clickbait, like where we're just like reading just topics or summaries, we're not getting the full gist of things. So we're now reacting to these things that we know half ass about. So that's the part that's winning is that we don't actually realize what we're even participating in. So if like someone says like let's make insulin affordable and your gut reaction is like no, why should we? Right? Ask yourself like who taught me that compassion is a threat? Who taught me that there isn't enough for everybody to like survive, to be okay? We see this all the time. The moment a policy is proposed that centers around dignity and access and equity, and suddenly the machine just kicks right in. The headlines shift and the distractions begin. It happens all the time. We're seeing it day in and day out. And we just beat them down because there's just this narrative of fear that's at work. And we don't pay attention to the system because we keep just listening to the clickbait information because reading and going deep into the knowledge of it is too exhausting. It's too much because we're already overwhelmed. So who has time to actually read the full context or sit there patiently? So then when I hear things where people say like, well, I'm not on Medicaid, so that's not a policy that affects me. Or, well, what's happened recently, right? Birthright citizenship changes, won't affect my family. We're already citizens. Okay. All right. That's cute. Because what happens when the hospitals near you shuts down because it relied on Medicaid funding? What happens when public school closures spill over into overcrowding at your good school district? What happens when legal precedents built on stripping rights from them suddenly reach you? You see this happening where people are like, oh, that's not going to affect me. And suddenly someone they know in their family is deported. Because the truth is, oppression is not a gated experience. And I think that we have all become so short sighted. It creeps in. And once the infrastructure is in place to dehumanize one group, it can be repurposed for anyone. This has been going on for centuries, guys. This is why history is important. We have to learn this stuff. The cycles happen. So let's really sit with this idea that it doesn't affect me. So why bother? And that's what I heard in that conversation. It's the short term thinking that dressed up as practicality, because at some point, it is going to matter. It sounds logical, it sounds responsible, it sounds like boundaries, but in reality, it's breeding ground for apathy. And apathy is where empathy goes to die because there's this idea of the short sightedness. And then later we see it. We've got to think long form. We have to. It only works until the ripple effect reaches you. And by then, the damage is already done. The trust is broken. There's no repair. Short term thinking says, well, if my rights aren't being touched, it's not urgent. If my paycheck hasn't changed, the economy's fine. Like I'm doing fine. Yeah, that sucks for others, but oh well. If I don't need assistance, then those programs must be a waste. And you know what? There are a lot of people who take advantage of those systems. Sure, there are. But there's a lot of people who use them well. And short term thinking doesn't account for how fast things change. It doesn't account for the policy dominoes. It doesn't account for how deeply interconnected we really are. And honestly, they're waiting on you to saying, oh, well, that's fine. Oh, you know what? That's okay too. It's a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope. The loss of empathy starts here with that quiet little whisper, with that quiet little micro moment of, well, it's not really my issue. Someone else will deal with it. It's okay. Well, what's this one thing? I don't have time for this right now. Like, it's okay. It's not going to affect our community. Oh, really? Until it starts to. It doesn't start with cruelty. Here's the thing, it starts with convenience. It starts with, oh, well, yeah, that's practical. Oh, yeah, that actually makes sense. Because real empathy, the kind that changes things, it requires us to zoom out. We have to look at the bigger picture. We have to look at what is happening over time here. We have to imagine a world beyond our immediate comfort zone. And we have to ask, what happens if this is just the beginning? Who am I becoming if I only ever care about what touches me directly? I think the irony is that we only realize how connected we are when it's too late to connect. So the challenge that becomes, can I choose empathy, not because it's urgent for me, but because it's urgent for someone? And because I know how fast someone could become me. Empathy is not about taking on every cause. I know we can't do that. It's not physically possible. And it's not about being emotionally available for the entire world, also not possible. And it's not about staying awake. It's not about letting convenience become comfortable. It's about paying attention before the system knocks on your door and starts to make things affect you. Because when you finally look up and say, wait, how did this happen? The answer might be it's happened while you were telling yourself it wouldn't. It's like, I'm sure we all have those friends and we have those moments where it's like the plane is crashing, you're giving them a parachute, but they're like, no, 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 I'm fine, I'm good. You just want to shake them, right? And here's what I've noticed in myself and in so many people that I work with. When we feel overwhelmed, we unconsciously pull back into our corners. It's normal. I just told you, I watched the Flintstones because I was so overwhelmed. And we stay in these curated spaces and carefully choose our bubbles. And I get it. But the cost is that we have less curiosity. We ask less questions. We have less context about things. We make way more assumptions. We have more outrage. And we stop asking what happened to you. And we start saying, what is wrong with you? And we start getting angry and enraged. Now, this isn't just like a vibe that I'm picking up on. The data backs it. A University of Michigan study found that empathy among students has dropped by 40% since 2000. And that is the sharpest drop after smartphones and social media exploded. Meanwhile, narcissism has gone up 58% in the same time frame. And different research has shown that 79% of Americans believe that political discourse has become more disrespectful. It's become angry, which is code for we don't listen to understand anymore because it's too exhausting to even listen and pay attention. Kind of miss when politics was boring, to be honest. We can't pretend that this doesn't affect us because here's what happens when empathy drops. Like, this is research right here. This is data. You can't fight data. Our trust declines, both in each other and institutions. Check, already happened. Our brains show less activity in empathy related regions when we perceive someone as an other. Check, already happening. And fear based narratives literally shut down empathic concern in the brain, making us a lot more reactive, more tribal, and more vulnerable to manipulation. Check, and it's happening. So, yeah, when fear wins, the people who profit from division, they win. I remember visiting a small town in Southern Illinois. This is years ago. This was in 2018. It's the kind of place that's been forgotten about, basically by everyone. Like schools had closed down. There are things that were turned into meth houses, people living in trailers. You could feel the heaviness in the air. And not just poverty, but grief. Like you could really feel generational grief. You could feel anger. And you know what? I understood it because I was there. I visited. I spent time there. And empathy didn't mean that I agree with every belief that they have in this town. It just meant that I could see what led them to making the decisions that they did. I could understand what led them to vote the way that they did. And if we can't even try to understand how someone got to a certain belief or feeling, then how are we ever going to connect with each other and actually come together? We're not. The thing is that our nervous systems are wired to protect us from danger, to scan for threats. And it helps us to stay small in those ways. So to stay safe means we have to stay small. So of course it makes sense that when something unfamiliar shows up, a new idea, a community that we don't understand, a headline designed to freak us out, we feel that tightness in our bodies and we judge and we defend and we distance ourselves. That's what our bodies are built to do. But going to that town, having that conversation, all of these things, putting myself in spaces where you wouldn't think that I would go, and having conversations, even when it feels so uncomfortable to me and I feel it in myself. But the thing is that what I hear more than often is that a lot of us have the same concerns. A lot of us have the same fears. A lot of us have the same challenges. And if we can stop with letting the division happen, if we can stop from being hijacked, that's when we're actually going to be able to like reignite that empathy. Because what happens in those moments where we are reactive and where we've given into the whole like, well, it's not my problem, so why should I care? We're operating from a place of scarcity. We're operating from this place that if I have something and someone else now needs it, that means there's going to be less for me. Why? Why is there going to be less for you? If someone can have a billion, billions of dollars and it's infinite, then why can't we have something more each that can help us like exist and survive and thrive? It shouldn't be a either I thrive or you thrive. Why can't we just thrive? There's 8 billion people in this world. I think it's okay if we all care about each other. Who does it benefit when we tune each other out? It benefits the group that is actually monopolizing on us being divisive. The thing is, empathy is a discipline, it's context, it's courage. So it's really important that we don't lose it, because if we do, we won't just lose our connection, we're going to lose each other. And like, I feel that. I feel it all the time. That's where, even in that conversation I had with a friend back in 2020, going to that small town in Southern Illinois, whatever it may be, I listen and I take from it what it means. But what I have noticed more and more is that if we react to every news bait, if we react to every conversation, then we're not actually giving ourselves the space to actually think about it, have insights, respond. If we're too busy defending our belief systems and our fate and coming against each other, we're never going to actually find a way to exist together. And the ones who want empathy to become a sin and the ones who want to think of empathy as a weakness, they're going to win. They're going to continue to win. That's where we're going to destroy our society. And that's why I believe that losing empathy right now is dangerous. It's dangerous for our society. It's dangerous for our communities. It's dangerous for ourselves, because we know this. You give someone an inch, they take a mile. And if you give an entire group of individuals who are very opportunistic and they're trying to build up whatever they have to on the backs of those of our entire community that are struggling, who do you think is going to win? So I want you to take this moment and actually consider that, what if I did care? And I'm not saying go out on the streets and become a protester or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is, what if you just did care? What if instead of making a joke at someone's expense or at a community's expense, you think about, what would that mean if it happened to me? How would I feel about that? How would I feel if my rights were stripped away from me? How would I feel if I had to second guess every time I walked down a street? How would I feel if I knew that someone's grandparent no longer can get healthcare? How do I feel if that happened to my grandparent? We all have some form of comforts in our lives that allow us to look the other way, but we as a society only thrive if we actually take care of each other. So I really just encourage that instead of us having such deep reactions to everything, the minute you see something that's going to enrage you, take a step back and be like, is that something that I need to be enraged by? Or is that something I need to learn more about? Is that something that I want to understand better? Is that something that I need more context around? What does this mean? Maybe not for me, but what does this mean for the community that I'm around? To take a moment and just consider that. Because having conversations where someone says, well, it doesn't matter for me, so I don't really care. The fact that I'm hearing it more and more, just feeling really disheartening. But I'm also encouraged by the fact that when this pendulum swings in one way and it's gone very much in an extreme place, it's going to swing right back the other way. So let's come together and recognize that empathy is not a sin. It's not a evil entity. It's not a weakness. It's actually what's going to help us as a society.
I really hope that you enjoy this episode, and I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode, and thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.